something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Salutations, good morning, welcome. This is your host, the Readman, Jesse Turner, and you're listening to the Truth to Power Hour on 103.5 WNHH, New Haven, Connecticut, where you only get the truth and you get it for free and you get it without commercials. Can't get any better than that. Today, our guest is Joe. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Joseph Kalavik. I'm a member of the Bridgeport Board of Education and the Vice Chair. But today I'm speaking as myself as an individual.
All right, and I refer to Joe as a foot soldier for equity in Connecticut. He's been fighting this battle for well over a decade, maybe two, maybe his whole life. But in any event, today we want to talk about Joe. I'm watching the news, and because I live in West Hartford, the Connecticut News always features Hartford. And of course, they have a $174 million deficit, and the mayor talking about transparency, and you know, there are going to be cuts and painful cuts coming in Hartford. And you know, one of the things that Connecticut, I think people don't understand, and I'm hoping you'll help us, this ECS formula. What is it? What is it? What does it do? And what was its purpose?
Yeah, the ECS formula. Oh, first of all, just quick correction. I think it's 74 for Hartford, 74 million for Hartford.
Okay.
It's still damaging. It's still,
all right, still damaging.
Yeah.
That means Hartford's down to almost no librarians, down in music teachers, art teachers, PE teachers, all the things that matter. So those are the things and the public should know. When budgets come down to the nitty gritty, everyone says, well, we got to keep the math teachers, the science teachers, the reading teachers. They try to keep these things over there.
Yeah, and Bridgeport, right. And Bridgeport's at $44.1 million that we need to keep. And these are numbers to keep operating at the same insufficient manner that we are now. Not to add one position. But just
and that's what this formula is for, right? This formula is to make up shortcomings. And if you were on our show once before, and pretty much I know if we followed the adjusted for inflation, I think since 2011, we would be fine now. Nobody would be having any deficit.
Right.
It's before the show started, I mentioned to Joe the average cost of a house, a new home in America, in 2011 was $119,000. Today it's over $400,000. So that gives us an idea how inflation over time adjusts. So we're still operating on a formula that acts like it's 2011. Is that right, Joe?
Yes, and it hasn't been adjusted since 2013. And the formula, I think the formula itself is okay if it was followed with fidelity and had the increases. We would have no racial funding gap as it is today, but we do. And the formula does have some issues, as you just mentioned right now. Well, first let me break down what the formula is a little bit. The formula starts with a base amount, foundation amount, which is, you can see right here. It's $16,525. No, $15,525 is the foundation amount. From that foundation amount, they add weights. Like an English language learner will get a weight of 0.30. I may get some of the weights mixed up. Then there's a poverty weight. We'll get another 0.25. So you're looking at like Bridgeport will have like, I'm just giving example numbers. These aren't going to be true to, like if you got 19,000 students in Bridgeport, those multipliers will have 26,000 students. And then you take that and multiply it by the per student amounts. And then you multiply that by a factor of what they think the locality could pay. So the city will pick up, say, 30%, and the state will pick up 70%, depending upon your weights. And the problem with the formula is when you mentioned increased property wealth, some of the things making that balance between local and city. Local and state portions are the wealth factor, how much money people are making, and Bridgeport is actually increasing wealth, but we're not increasing our tax. And we also increased our property tax base, but we haven't increased our property taxes. So we brought in a lot of wealth, and we're bringing in more wealth coming up. So it's going to even get worse because we're Steel Point's ready to go online, and everybody coming in there is going to be making higher than average, which drops down our poverty rate. But none of these people are really going to be using Bridgeport Public Schools. Let's be real; they're going to be going to private schools. The kids are going to be going to private schools, and if they do use the schools, it's still going to be underfunded. So that's going to drag us down even further down the hole.
And to get this idea why, if more wealthier people are moving in and we're building new luxury apartments, luxury housing and stuff, part of that tax base is we defer taxes. And so I'm familiar with this from New Jersey. We did this on our waterfront, and we had people who bought houses in 1980 who didn't start paying any property taxes until 2020. They were given waivers for property taxes. And I normally just say to Joe Public, imagine if they told you when you bought your house you won't pay property taxes for 10, 20, 30
Yeah,
years. Just imagine. That would be a dream. So the wealthy, and it's not that I'm not anti-wealth at all. It's a good thing, but to give the breaks to the people at the top, it does hurt us in other ways too. But that's not really the issue in this piece. The other issue is people wonder why the state has to contribute to Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, Waterbury, these school districts. It's because in these districts, much of the state's buildings are placed, courthouses, prisons, universities, all kinds of properties that are non-taxable. We don't move them into Greenwich. We move them into New Haven. We move them into Bridgeport. And these are often massive complexes. So the State Board of Education, Hartford, takes up a massive block. And that could be something else that pay taxes. But they don't pay taxes. They get their snow cleaned. They get their streets cleaned. They get police patrolling and all that stuff that comes with living in the city. So the state, because most of these are state buildings in there, contribute, not out of that they have a good heart, but because they owe something to those communities for allowing them to put those buildings there.
Right, and what they pay is massively undervalued and underfunded, even to the portion that they're supposed to be paying.
Right. So we've got that. So Joe, I'm thinking about you. We talked about this maybe about 2 months ago on the air, and there's been a lot of talk with legislation. So I'm wondering what's happening in the state with legislation regarding education, and particularly this ECS formula, and maybe its impact on Bridgeport. And people, whatever the impact that's on Bridgeport, trust me, that's the impact on New Haven, that's the impact on Waterbury, that's the impact on Hartford. So could you explain what's going on legislatively?
Well, legislatively, there has been some incremental progress, but woefully insufficient for the needs of the major cities. And the only reason I really got to say this, the only reason there's progress happening for New Haven, Bridgeport, New Britain, Waterbury, and these cities is because, honestly, all the other districts are starting to feel it. All the other white wealthy districts are starting to feel it to some extent as well, because their ECS has been frozen, and they're starting to feel the tiniest bit of pain that the major black and brown cities have felt over the last few decades. I mean, Hartford probably felt it before Bridgeport, and Bridgeport been feeling it for quite a while as well. So I'm not really sure who started feeling it first, but that doesn't matter. It's not a race because we're all in the same boat. And now that we've put additional districts in that boat, everybody's feeling the pain, so there's some movement. SB 7 currently, as it stands, is insufficient for Bridgeport's needs. I'm pretty sure Hartford's needs. I was looking at some of the numbers. Those are only two numbers I really looked at. Initially, when we were talking about SB 7, we were calculating it based on the numbers, the prior year's enrollment numbers, and Bridgeport was expecting about $18 million for the $1,000 boost. However, we lost 720 students, some of them English language learners, and some of them uh, on the lower end of the income spectrum, which affected our reimbursement rates. So that's dropping to approximately a little over $5 million.
So and one of those things when we say, we lost students, it's sort of my friend Robert Cotto from Harvard. He would say things like, choice has destroyed the Harvard public schools.
Absolutely.
And he would talk about, well, when students leave our schools to go to an alternative school, we pay the transportation. If they receive special education funding or second language learning, by literacy or whatever the services are, we pay for them. And so people, even though the students have left the community, Bridgeport is still paying for those students. Hartford's still paying for them. New Haven's still paying for them. Waterbury's still paying for them. And that stuff. And so could share a little bit about has school choice, is it something that, because, we do a lot of things in this country. We say, oh, this is going to be good for poor people. This is going to be good for people of color. And then all of a sudden we look around 10 years later and we say, wait a minute, what happened? It's like the switcheroo stuff. So has school choice lifted New Haven, helped with the funding, helped the schools?
Oh, no, I'm going to need a couple of minutes to go into this one. The road to Hades is filled with good intentions.
Okay.
There was good intentions to integrate the schools, especially within Hartford. They got the case. Why is it just escaping me now?
Sheff versus O'Neill.
Thank you. Sheff versus O'Neill. It was good intentions to integrate the schools. There was not enough integration in the schools. I get that. However, it has taken on a life of its own, which with charter schools and magnet schools, they both suffer to some extent of not serving the demographic that the traditional public schools. My son's school, for instance, he goes to a magnet school. I am of the mind that magnet schools should not exist as a person striving for equity. But as a parent, I put my son in the best place I could, and we got lucky and got into education school. But a good education shouldn't be a matter of luck. That being said, my son's school has probably about 8 to 10% less English language learners, about 10%, maybe 10% less special education students. And when you get to the charter schools, it's a much bigger disparity. You take Capital Prep, for instance. Guys always all over knocking the schools, looking how good we do. He's got about an 11% English language learner compared to Bridgeport with 30%. I'm not sure of Hartford's numbers, but I'm sure it's pretty up there as well. So when you're educating 90-something% of people speaking English and 92% of people who don't have disabilities, of course you're going to do well on the metrics because the tests are in English and you've got less needs for accommodations when you're taking those exams. So it's not a very big accomplishment. Yes, it's good for those kids. And like I said, I'm not knocking the parents that send their kids to school because you want the best opportunity for your child as an individual. But if you brought all those kids back, because both Hartford and Bridgeport, I'm sure, got the capacity to bring back all these children without building additional schools, and taking all that money that's been invested in these dispersed areas and bringing them back with the children, we wouldn't need to be adding too many principals. And we could give the services these children need. So there's no need for outside schools to, quote unquote, do better for our children. And the problem with some of the narrative going around is, I just recently saw they were calling it out as racist, that Hartford wants to do some recruiting and pay like a per pupil retrieval amount to bring people back to the district. But what they fail to understand is that, yes, while these charter schools and some of the schools of choice, especially around the Hartford area, are black and brown in nature, they're not meeting the needs of all the students. And they're leaving behind about 75% of the black and brown community with the biggest needs, with the least resources, and is damaging more black and brown people than it's helping.
And they're leaving, the purpose of Sheff O'Neill was to lessen racial isolation. So 75% of the students are actually in more racially isolated schools. And I know from my wife used to be a teacher in Hartford. If you wanted to get into a magnet school, and you were a person of color, that was pretty tough. But if you were white, you it was open for you.
Yeah.
You could get in very quickly. You would always find one for you. So it's even that kind of stuff. So uh, students that were they didn't want to maybe even leave those that could help decrease racial isolation. White students in the district were fleeing to magnet schools and charter schools, and they were having an easy time of it. And so, yeah, it's a piece of legislation that I definitely see some drawbacks to it. But really, morally, we just have to say, what's the purpose of a reform that says we will lift 25% and leave the other 75%? That to me has always been a problem when I came to Connecticut, that piece over there. And I'm sure there are some good things. We got some exceptional magnet schools in the state and some opportunities for some students they wouldn't have. It's not a simple piece over there, but definitely I don't see it decreasing racial isolation in Bridgeport or in Hartford or in Waterbury. I would researchers would say those schools are more racially isolated than they were before the reforms.
Right, and it's a piecemeal avoidance of doing what actually needs to be done. It appeases the people who get in, and it's like, and then it makes the appearance of, hey, we're doing something. Like, Joe, you don't think Bridgeport Public Schools are adequate?
No.
Enter this lottery. You can send your kid to Westport, and if you win, you bring them down to Westport, and he gets to Westport, and there's some open choice slots there.
Yeah.
But that's not solving the problem of funding overall education.
No, and it's certainly not helping Bridgeport or Hartford because the districts would be paying for that transportation cost.
Correct.
And so that's different. Hartford has some magnet schools that are within the city, their own magnets, and they don't pay for transportation anymore. So they have suffered in that stuff. So the city used to pay, and so now the schools were added to pay that stuff. But yeah, it's all I don't know, smoke and mirrors and
Absolutely.
being an old. I'm from Jersey City, Hudson County, New Jersey. We were probably one of the most corrupt counties in the nation, and our politicians love new buildings. They love new buildings because that's how you give sweetheart deals. That's how you get bribes. I'm not saying these politicians are taking bribes and giving sweetheart deals, but they'd rather do that than to go back and repair an older building. And I worked for a number of politicians in my early days as a college student on campaigns, and I remember that. They'd rather sell a new building than to say, we will fix up 10 old buildings in your district and stuff. But all right, so we want another thing now. Tell us what's going on in Bridgeport.
Yeah.
You shared about Hartford.
Right. Yeah. But before we do that, can we just back up a little bit to
Go ahead.
just the legislation, because there's more than SB 7. This is something I discovered since I retired. My son is now a graduate. I got more time to dive deeper into bills. There are bills, like I said, I started off this piece by saying the road to hate is paved with good intentions. You got bills that affect education that you wouldn't even think affect education. Let's look at the free and reduced price lunch. Who could argue with feeding a hungry child? But when you look at the governor's initial budget, that $12 million that was paying for it was initially coming out of CREC funding, out of the magnet school funding, which would affect services to Hartford, Bridgeport, because we send a lot of kids to them to provide the services that we can't feasibly do. You look at that. You look at another admirable bill, transportation. Let's make all the buses electric and hybrid to take out for environmental justice. However, what that one fails to consider is there's going to be a cost to districts because they got to change over their whole infrastructure. And they're going to pass that cost on to the districts. The private bus companies aren't going to absorb the costs and give up their profits. No, they're going to, next go around, we're going to be paying $2 million in transportation costs in already an underfunded district. So no, if you're going to mandate something, you got to pay for it.
So if you mandate it, I like that piece. Mandate it, you pay for it. Connecticut is known as the state that mandates policy for its public schools and doesn't fund it.
Right.
So that's what we're talking about. They do that with literacy, they do that with curriculum, they do that all the time. So a mandate, an unfunded mandate, is a penalty on the taxpayers and stuff. So that's good. So when would we?
Right. Yeah, and before we move, I'm sorry. Before we move on to the other things, still in the legislature, we're talking about if mandate, if they fund it, they always talk about they have no money. These guardrails, artificial guardrails, need to be dropped. There's currently legislation to drop the guardrails or to ease them, along with a legislation to increase the tax rate on the rich, on the wealthy, by 1 to 2%, and property tax on the wealthy as well. So Bridgeport Board of Education passed a resolution to support all 4 of these revenue bills because we need long-term solutions. Right now, there's a big surplus. There's a big rainy day fund sitting in office. I know we had $9 billion in surpluses over the years, but there's probably about 4 or 5 just sitting there today that could be used to help the short-term problem, and the revenue bills could help fund the solution going forward. Now we can get the Bridgeport.
So you mean the governor's sitting on $9 billion?
I don't know the total balance right now, but
Somewhere. I think I read this week 9.7 billion, but we know it's billions.
Yes.
And AAUP often says it's $5 billion when the governor, that's the higher ed unions, and he always comes around and talks about workforce development, because I had mentioned that to you the other day. And it's funny, we talk about workforce development as it's a state priority, and that's that idea that we're investing in the future by investing in our people to assume jobs. And I'm thinking there's no bigger workforce development in the world than our public schools. So this piece, if we're sitting on 9 billion and we're not fully covering the free and reduced lunch, or we're not helping with the transition to electric buses, which he has the money to help districts do that. That's what we're saying here. And I don't know when the rainy day is ever going to come, but that fund keeps doubling and doubling over there. So it's over there. So the rainy day fund, 9 billion. And my point is, isn't this the time that the state has the money? And isn't that what a rainy day fund is? And so when there's a leak in my house, in the roof, and things are tough and I can't afford to fix it, and then all of a sudden I get a big tax rebate, and I say, I'm going to fix that over there. And it seems in Connecticut, what we do with that fund is ignore it.
Yes, and
it's
said it's colloquially named the Rainy Day Fund. I like to draw the comparison. It's raining in Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, New Britain, Waterbury, and all these other cities and towns, and our kids are basically drowning. Now let's talk about surplus. This is not a surplus. This is money taken off the back of our children. You can't have a surplus when kids are suffering. You can't have a surplus when the state of Connecticut is not meeting its constitutional mandate to provide a free and appropriate public education, especially in Bridgeport.
So no, and this is the last time we spoke, I asked you, is this not systemic racism? I know that's not popular right now, but isn't this I mean, and we said before, good intentions. So I'm thinking about when the Ku Klux Klan is deciding how to help black people, whatever good intentions they have, I think will be bad intentions in the end.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Does race have anything to do with this?
Oh, I believe absolutely. Race has a lot to do with it. I've mentioned this in some of the bills I testified, because they're actually sanitizing race out of most of the language in the bills. Like the aspiring educators no longer mentions black and brown, underrepresented minorities. It's just aspiring educators from communities. It stripped out the Alliance District's language, which is mostly black and brown. And in my testimony, I equated it's basically systemic racism, because Connecticut's history, going back to the denial of, we could have had the first African American college in Bridgeport. I mean, I'm sorry, in
New Haven,
in Connecticut, right? In the whole country, it could have been in New Haven, but Yale and the state of Connecticut blocked it by a vote of 304 to, I don't remember the number. I think it's 304 to 7.
And what's
Wow.
interesting about that was Ebenezer Bassett, who's the first black graduate of any university in Connecticut. He was at Central Connecticut State University. He was down in New Haven pushing for that. And when they said no, he left and went to Pennsylvania. I became the principal of Cheney School for Colored Men, and that became the first historically black college in the nation, Cheney College. But we chased him out.
Right.
And,
Right. And throughout Connecticut's history is all. I mean, every step of the way they come in kicking and screaming. Chef versus O'Neill had to happen. Horton versus Mescal had to happen. We're still over. I mean, one of the things I brought up, Connecticut don't need burning crosses. We've got legislation to do that.
So we've got legislation to do.
Yeah, because it's legislation. It's quietly, it's local and state legislation. We're stripping out the language. We're not fully funding the formula. We got a formula where school and state finance tracks the racial funding gap, and it's close to $1 billion now. And legislation.
$1 billion would solve everybody's deficit this year.
Correct.
No problem. Even half of $1 billion would solve them all.
And in addition to that, the black and brown and poverty-stricken people, we can't move to Greenwich, we can't move to Westport because of the restrictive zoning, which is the modern-day redlining. So, like I said, Connecticut doesn't need burning crosses. They got the whole legal system.
So we've got them in our laws, we've got them in our zoning laws, we got them in our tax laws. Connecticut's the only state in the nation that has a regressive income tax, so poor people actually pay a higher percentage than the wealthy do. Yes, it's a state with a lot of problems. But what can we do, state? What can we do for this state? There's some things we can do.
Yeah, we can make our voice heard. Our voice is being heard because you see they're making a lot more noise than, and hopefully it's not just appeasement noise. Hopefully it's noise of fear of losing re-elections, and there's some real change made. Because that's the only time any change is made, and we definitely need to put pressure on the governor, because that's where the pressure goes. I mean, as far as our legislators, yes, we meet with our legislators, we push our legislators, but our legislators are doing good. I'm going to continue to keep pushing pressure on them as long as, and Rob Traber and the board got a group advocacy meeting, ad hoc committee on advocacy that meets to try to design advocacy and do some more pushes. And everybody needs to work together. The next advocacy meeting is going to be on April 9th at 3 p.m. in room 305 to give people tips. We're trying to get everybody out. It's everybody out to write the governor, write the mayors, working with other districts to get things done. It needs to be a cohesive effort, because this is an overall problem. This is not a Bridgeport problem. It's a Bridgeport problem, Waterbury problem, Hartford problem, a problem of every single district across the state.
And to me, this is all workforce development. So if I want to, we know that Texas builds its prisons by how many third graders fail their reading tests. That's the story with Texas. And that's why we talk about school to prison pipelines. So here we are in Connecticut. We have an opportunity. This is workforce development. If I can help our kids, our poorest kids, be better readers, be better writers, do more math exposure, better artists, better everything, athletes, you name it, I would be developing our workforce. So there's a reason that Silicon Valley went to California. California at the time had the highest, spent the most money per students, and gave free college education to anyone, not just if you were poor, if you were a billionaire. So when Bill Gates and Steve Jobs was looking around, they have children too, and they thought, whoa, my kids could go to UCLA and they could go free. They watched that. And so what happened is Silicon Valley went to California. It would never come to Connecticut. Right. You have to pay for your college. We don't give you the highest. We don't spend the most money per student. But those are things. So I do look at it. I know our legislators and our governor love to talk about workforce development. And I constantly try to remind them there's no greater workforce development. It starts with preschool. As soon as those kids come in, they're learning to raise their hand. They're learning to stand in line. They're learning to be nice and respectful to each other. They're learning their letters, their numbers. When I used to have a small janitorial business, I didn't need super high skills, but I needed kids who were polite, kids who could fill out papers. Yes, the bathrooms were clean. This was done. I did these things. Simple kind of literacy pieces over there, but that's workforce development. So I think we want to remind our legislators that all of if we the greatest workforce development Connecticut can do and to attract high tech businesses. They're not going to come to a state that doesn't fund its schools fully. They're just not going to come to those kinds of places. Underfunded schools, unfunded mandates. This is not their place to go. So it's something to remember. So it
Yeah.
is workforce development.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd like to shift to Bridgeport on that point for a bit. Yeah, they'll come to some portions of Bridgeport, like Stanford will build up, and because Stanford got pretty decent schools. Westport will draw people, but Bridgeport has a problem drawing people because we are not doing our local portion of funding either. It's not just on the state; it's a state and a local issue. Um, when Bridgeport develops an amphitheater, when Bridgeport develops attempts for a soccer stadium. This workforce development, you want to draw companies from outside. They're not looking, oh, I'm going to relocate my company somewhere. Let me find somewhere with an amphitheater. No, they're looking for somewhere with good schools where
Right.
that they work where they would get employees from, where the employees' children could go to without too much trouble. They're not looking at all this stuff that the city of Bridgeport is developing. They're looking at the schools. So Bridgeport needs to step up their game and fund their schools more. Now, because Ganem offered $5 million, and the headline is historic investment in schools, an additional $5 million. We are $44.1 million, and if that holds true and nothing passes through the legislator in the state, we're still $39 million short.
Right. And what you're saying is we don't need to build a new amphitheater. We don't need to build new soccer stadiums if we really want to do that workforce development. Or maybe a better way to say it, if we really loved all our children, then we would do what's right. And we would put our schools above our new soccer stadium over there, that kind of stuff over there. So that makes sense to me. Now let's get back to Bridgeport. You have some ideas specifically what you can do in Bridgeport. Can you share those with us? Because we want to give the public some hope. And there's some hope. So it's not only what Bridgeport can do, it's what Hartford can do, it's what Waterbury can do, New Haven, all our cities throughout the state. But let's start with Bridgeport.
Right. Yeah. Like I was saying earlier, we could, as groups at Bridgeport, we're working with different groups. We're working with Connecticut for All. We're working with NAACP in Bridgeport. We're working with a couple other groups. Excuse me if I missed your group. It's not intentional. Who else are we working with? A whole plethora of Bridgeport Generation Now, and we're all coming together with a common message to basically fund our schools. And it's a numbers game, because if the people who control the purse strings, and let's be clear about this, it's the governor, because he's got his veto pen, and we would have to get enough votes to overturn his veto, which would be basically impossible if it's just the cities working together. So the pressure needs to be brought on the governor. Everybody needs to write the governor, let him know his reelection is in jeopardy. I mean, he could literally $39.1 million in cuts. If that has to come to Bridgeport, there's going to be closed schools. And when a primary comes, there might not be a place for people to vote because the school's closed. And I hope this pressure works and brings us funding. But the hope is that there is movement, so the advocacy efforts are paying dividends, but they need to be strengthened, and they need to be more.
And my friend Dr. Robert Codal talks about Hartford school closings. He says they close the schools in usually in the most heavily Hispanic and Black communities. Those are the schools that get closed. And we have a number there was a guy, G.T. Brown from Chicago, who had a series of hunger strikers to keep a school open. And he would always say, you close a school, then you close the bank, then you've harmed us economically. Schools revitalize our communities. It's where we bring our kids to play in the playground. It's where we can, if we can walk to school, that's better. We walk our daughter, our son. He used to say, I walk my son to school. I feel safer. Chicago's a tough city. I bring him right to the school door over there. So yeah, it's that stuff. So when they start to close schools, they don't seem to close schools in those new wealthy development areas in our cities. They close them in the most needy communities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. My district. I live in the North End. None of the schools on the North End are even close to being on chopping block. In fact, some of them are being renovated for the second time, and we're getting a brand new school on the North End as well. And and it's sad. And additional pressures that closed schools bring is the old Harding building. It's still boarded up.
Yeah.
Going close to 8 to 10 years now, at least. Well, no longer than that. It's been boarded up since.
They'll turn it into condominiums soon.
No, they may turn it into a school again later on, but that's another story.
Okay.
But that just illustrates. And then you got, I believe it's Longfellow School that has been boarded up for 12, 13 years. And what this does is depresses the whole neighborhood. You're walking by a building every day, abandoned building, boarded up, homeless people sleeping inside, attracting elements, stripping the pipes, stripping the copper, and criminal activity going on. And right now it's troubling because I don't see a way. Right now, the best case scenario, if everything passes and the wish list and governor, I estimate we still got at least 20 million to go. Best case scenario right now, if everything passes shiny and new. But that's
half of what you need.
And it's a way optimistic projection.
A way optimistic projection. So the other piece that I'm hearing you talking about when you mention all the groups that are starting to come together, we all know that old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And so what we're really saying is, let's squeak loud, get that oil in our wheels. So the more we can come together, we write to the governor. It's very easy to write to your legislator. You know, the Connecticut.com gov you just put your address in, and they'll pull up your list of legislators, and you can write to them over there. But it's easy to do, but not. And while when I say it's easy to make some noise, and making some noise makes a difference. That's what we're saying here.
Absolutely. And for the city of Bridgeport in particular, I would like to note that Bridgeport Day is coming on April 22nd, and we plan on swarming Hartford en masse and making our presence heard.
So at the Capitol.
Correct.
So you're gonna have to call me, Joe, because I'm just 3 miles from the Capitol building. So you remind me, say, Jesse, come on up, join us.
Yeah,
I'll join you.
Right, and everybody who has their days, the Hartford days or whatever, when they go up, we need to swarm. The governor needs to see numbers. We can't swing a legislator to overturn a veto.
No.
Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury, New Britain, we got enough to swing the governor.
Yeah, there's Willimantic, so we got them on the eastern end of the state. Ashford, we've got places up there that are high poverty areas and struggling as well. And yes, we should swarm them, and we should remind them, do the right thing. It's kind of interesting to me that if we care for all of our children, because I remember when George Bush Sr. was the president, he said he wanted to be the education president. He brought us to high stakes testing that decimates our schools these days and cost about $2 billion every year in America. That stuff. But if you want to be the education governor, you want to be the educated legislator over there, then you need to really care for all our kids, not just some of them, and that stuff. So let's push for that. And we talk, and you've got some ideas you said about Bridgeport specifically. Bridgeport's going to come to Hartford on, I think you said April 22nd, and they'll swarm the Capitol building, and that will be cool. And I think I'll join you on that day.
Awesome.
Come over there, hang out. walk
I'll
around.
make sure to give you a call, but when we go
Yeah,
there.
give me a call. I'll join you, and
Yeah.
I'll bother some of my legislators. They'll be shocked. What are you in here for Bridgeport for? And I'll say, well, Bridgeport counts. It's over there, and it's really about.
What happens to Hartford? What happens to all
Right,
odds?
and it's the stuff. Now, if we do have we have faithful listeners from Hartford to the show, and we definitely have, and they've been struggling. It seems to be that every 5 years a drastic cut comes to the budget, and they're going to have their class sizes are going to increase. They're going to lose crucial staff like special educators, reading specialists, librarians, social workers, counselors, and stuff like that. So what advice do you give Hartford?
Oh, I got advice. I'm going to be going up to the Board of Education, and I'm going to be doing this. Hartford, New Haven, New Britain, any other district I have not named. We as Board of Education members, this is a message to Board of Education members in particular. This is just basically my message. It's not supported by my board. I'm just going out to my Board of Education as well. We as elected officials have to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Connecticut. Part of those constitutional duties as board members is to provide a free and appropriate public education to our students. And another one of those obligations is to balance our budget. We all need to come together and draft resolutions. I mean, we can't spend more than we get, and we shouldn't do that because that would leave us legally liable. However, what we could do is we could pass a resolution stating, under the current funding that we are receiving, we cannot, in good conscience, cut any more from our budgets because that would be in violation of federal law and the state constitution to provide a free and appropriate public education. Therefore, we're calling on the state of Connecticut and our localities to provide funding to meet the state obligation to approve, to provide a free and appropriate public education. Because they're not meeting their mandate. They're not meeting their constitutional obligations. This is Ned Lamont, this is Joe Ganim, and whoever their local leaders are who have been underfunding their schools and passing the pain points off to the boards of education, because I and my fellow board members are the ones that have to look people in the eyes and tell them, you no longer have a job. We're the ones that have to look at the children and tell them, you no longer have an art program. You no longer have after-school sports. You no longer have a school. And after 8 years of doing this, I've done cuts. The other day, the board got an email from an individual who's leaving the district. I'm not going to mention the title, due to lack of job security. And they were profusely apologetic. And they said, if it was at all possible that they would be staying with us, because they have testified and everything, but they got their own families to feed and their own careers to object, and that's understandable. But they just couldn't stick it out anymore, and we're losing great employees even before we have to make the cuts, because it seems inevitable and hopeless. And we should never have to be cutting jobs. We shouldn't have to take away from kids. And if that's the case, that we got to continue to vote to take away things from our children, the people who are forcing us to do it should be the ones that say, you tell us what to take away from the children.
Right, and we also, another reason we lose our employees, we lose teachers often in priority school districts because they pay less.
Correct.
So Hartford pays anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 less. So think about yourself as a young husband or wife, and we're talking about, if you move to the next district over, you'll make an extra $15,000 a year. And then as a former union member, I would remind them that if you calculate that over 30 years, that increases your pension, contribute output. So it's a massive amount of money we're talking about here. But yes, we're losing. Teachers don't leave because of the kids. Teachers leave because of stuff like this. Feel threats to their job, their job security, the other stuff that goes on. if I'm a teacher in a struggling district, and the class size keeps going up and up because I'm laying off teachers, that's why they leave and stuff. And that's why it's not surprising for me to hear an employee say, "I'm sorry that I'm leaving." It's almost like an apology letter, and I hear that all the time.
And that was one of the first times, because our efforts are being noticed, and people are finally starting to connect it, that it's not the Board of Educations that are making these cuts. I mean, we end up with the face of it, but they're realizing it's not us. They see the strong efforts in Bridgeport, and they apologize, and they thanked us for advocating. And that's the first time I've had a resignation come to me that thanked us for advocating. Thanks us for advocating and trying so hard to make it so that they could stay and our children could receive. And this person is going to continue advocating. Thank God.
And we know that, this, an appropriate education is a downgrade. The Supreme Court, the CJEF case, which was a case that where the Supreme Court acknowledged that every child in the state of Connecticut does not receive a high quality education, that inequity dominated the school system. And they said that. But when they were asked, well, what should the state do? They let them off the hook with terms like a basic and appropriate education. And so that was a shocker to me. I thought once they won the first part of the case, the second part would be compensation, but it never happened. And it's also a reminder to me, I come from a blue state, New Jersey, been predominantly blue for years. Once in a while it jumps over. But I've seen, whether it doesn't matter the party that's in control, sometimes they do things. And Malloy made appointments to the Supreme Court. And as a mayor, he supported that case. And as soon as he became governor, he distanced himself from the case and sabotaged that court here, in my opinion. That's a personal opinion. But Malloy didn't do anything, in my opinion, to help New Haven, Bridgeport, Hartford. We acknowledged that the Supreme Court, and neither did the Supreme Court acknowledge. And so this idea that appropriate is not enough for me. Idea what high quality education for all children. And if we do that, that to me is the best workforce development program we can have. A high quality education. It's the soccer stadium, the amphitheater isn't going to bring businesses and those new tech companies in. But what's going to bring them in is if we have a high quality education for all children. Then they'll consider coming. They'll move their companies here. They'll develop, and we miss out on that in that sense. But I never liked that appropriate terminology.
Right, and I think there may be a legal workaround. I think it might be time to put the state of Connecticut back on the hook, because part of the state statute mentions not only FAPE, but the boards of education are supposed to provide an equal and equitable education across the schools.
Right.
So the state should be doing the same, but we are not providing an equitable education across the districts, and not substantially equal, and that's inappropriate. And if there's any lawyers listening that want to take a pro bono case on and something that would like boost your career up, I'm willing to be lead plaintiff. I'm willing to step back, let somebody else be lead plaintiff, because I don't got to be the face. But somebody needs to step up and sue the state of Connecticut to finally fund our schools and put them on the hook and keep them on the hook, so we don't keep repeating this cycle. Because I really can't see where we're going to cut even $4 million in Bridgeport, and we're looking at a minimum of $20 to $30 million in a district that has 0 librarians, in a district where only about approximately 60% of our schools have assistant principals. It is disgusting what's being allowed to happen to our children in the state of Connecticut, one of the wealthiest in the nation. You see Ned Lamont, you see the governor, you see everybody crowing about, oh, we like number 1, number 2 in education in the country. But then you got these pockets. We would be number 1 if it was equitable across the board. When they do the other surveys that they don't like to talk about wealth disparities and outcome disparities in education, we rank near the bottom and they don't like to talk about that. Why don't we talk about our failures as much as we talk about our successes? Because
And everybody can do better. And so Connecticut can certainly do better, and we can start doing better by when we get these cries of deficits, when we're sitting on a $9 billion surplus, we should be coming to the aid of our districts. We should be saying it should almost be it's like my slogan is not one more librarian, not one more art teacher, not one more teacher, not one more social worker, not one more, counselor. We should be taking a stand. We've got $9 billion. And if we look at this formula, when you came on last time, you looked at the formula and you calculated if we adjusted the inflation, the governor would have to give the schools like $900 million, I think. I forget what the number is.
like
But tell us how much money that was.
1.2 at the time, I think.
How much was it?
About 1.2 now was.
Okay. So we have the money. We can do something about it, and we're not doing something about it. And the only way we're going to do something about it is really, you know, this is your basic. So I'm a Catholic. This is Lent. You're supposed to do good during this month. So what do? You're always, there's nothing, all the biblical scholars will put the passages that will say you're supposed to take care of the widow, the orphan, the poor. Well, our poor schools are the poor. And morally, they would want us to be able to fight for them and advocate. So I'm hoping to get a lot more squeaky noises so we can get that wheel greased over there and get that $9 billion, at least some of it over there. They could still have $8 billion, and I'm telling you, and we know they could solve every budget deficit in the state and then some. They could probably refix all the buses and everything.
Right, absolutely. I see we got probably like 7 minutes left. I just want to reiterate that people need to write the legislators, the governors, and other advocacy tips. You can find them on the Bridgeport Public Schools website. You can find them on my webpage. You can find them on Connecticut for All. You can find them in all of these groups. Like I said, the next meeting is on the 9th at 3 p.m., 45 Lion Terrace, room 305. It'll be live streamed on YouTube. We'll be talking about a couple of things about funding advocacy efforts and stuff like that. So we need all the help we can get. The more voices, the better.
All right. Well,
numbers speak to power.
Numbness speaks to power. And let's end with, if you had your way, a magical way of making this educational, course funding formula work, what would that look like? Or how would we, I know we've been saying fix the formula. Sometimes I want to just say honor the formula. What would that look like?
And it could use some tweaks. It could also, like I mentioned, they got the weights that increase the theoretical student counts, 30% for poverty, 30% for English language learners. But there's no weight for special education in there. If you put a weight for special education in there, that would make it more significant for the inner city districts, and because we've got a large portion of special education students. If we fully funded special education excess cost grants, if we fully funded every state mandate, if you mandate it, fund it.
If you mandate it, fund it. I like that.
Because mandate the whole thing. Remove property taxes from the equation altogether and make the state pay for everything.
All right. And it's when I tried to describe what was happening in America in its school funding formula, I was at the European Reading Conference, and we're talking about schools over here. And I was trying to explain this inequality. And of course, we had the people from Finland who always scored the best, and Belgium, the Netherlands, they're all there. And I remember them asking me questions, and their questions were like, don't they know that's not equitable, that's not fair? Shouldn't somebody be going to jail? This is their terminology, because what they do is, and Europe is not that much different than the U.S. So we hear about migrants, migrants are the tough population. They're the poorest population. They're all your second language learners. There's a lot of special needs there. They're more costly. So Europeans don't fund locally. They fund nationally. So when you have a high needs population, you're given more money to educate that population. And so, but they could not understand what we were doing here. And I remember one woman from Finland said, now I understand why you call it the school to prison pipeline. She was over there. But yes,
Yeah.
we've got things to do. We're going to make noise. We're going to show up. We're going to show up in Hartford. We're going to show up in Bridgeport. That means we should show up in New Haven, in Hartford. And we need our unions to join us, and they have been joining us.
Yes.
And that stuff. So AFT, Leslie Buteau in New Haven, they've been leading the way in that stuff. And I think, so I want to say thank you. I think we've come to the end of the show now. Joe, you have to come back. That's the way it is. We got to find out.
Hopefully I'll come back it'll be a victory.
The formula is fixed.
And I could take this shirt off and I could say, thank you, Ned.
Yeah. We got that. So any minute, we should be hearing the music. But Joe, is there any message you want to say to parents and teachers?
Yeah, just come out. Oh, and I forgot to mention the local NAACP. They've been very helpful in the effort.
For 100 years.
Parents, teachers, everybody, stick with us. We love you. We need you. We need you to keep fighting. We need you to fight with us. We need you to help us fight for you.
Okay, this is your host, Jesse Turner, Readman on 103 FM, WNHH, New Haven. I'll get back to you in 2 weeks. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. There's battle lines being drawn, and nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds are getting so much resistance from behind. Time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going on.